Di and I are having the marriage annulled on grounds of non-consummation. So I haven't fulfilled the conditions of the will.
Are you coming or what?
Well, it's all right. The film doesn't start till 7:30.
I know that, but I thought we were going to have a jar on the Wayland.
Well, I think it was destined to have a six-week trial period. And obviously the cast, and at the early stages, that's who I was much more involved with. The cast were very excited and you know, it was all great fun and we put everything in. I later learned that the technicians and the people in the studio were quite not very optimistic about it and thought it was not going to last and, oh, they couldn't really do it. But anyway, it was, as you all know, a triumph.
Ah, Meg! Come in.
Heavens!
Can I take your coat, your wrap?
Heavens!
Yeah, you said that before.
I began working at ATV because it was a big fluke. I had just come back from Italy working au pair, and a friend of mine who I was at school with, she was at an agency, and she said, "Oh, there's this job going," she said, "and it would probably suit you," and said something about television and gave me the address. And I thought it was somewhere like Radio Rentals, and it wasn't until I got in front of the actual building and it ATV. And I did get a job there, and I was about 6 or 7 months working in the sales department, and the job was advertised on the notice board for a trainee production assistant. And to cut a long story short, the fact that I was at that time 18 and you'd got to be 21, I thought this will be really good to see what the interview is like.
Are you still at it?
Oh, you know.
I've just come to pick up my car, okay?
Oh, it's been ready for ages.
Yeah, I've got the keys, but I've been up to my eyes, you know?
Know the feeling.
Yes, working with Noel Gordon, your memories... well, I worked with... I mean, I wasn't the music director, Jerry Allen was, you know, but I knew Noel very well and rehearsed with her, you know, when I was asked to rehearse with her. Yes, I mean, she was a fine lady. And in fact, I had the privilege, tragically when she died, I played at her funeral in the cathedral, and there was also a service at Edgbaston Church. Yeah. And she used to live near me because I used to live in Great Bar and she lived in Handsworth Wood, and occasionally she'd visit us. No, I got quite friendly with Noel, and I mean, she was a very big name at that time.
Not shocked, huh?
Shocked.
Well, the upheaval, what I've done, or rather what my daughter did to your old place.
I'm very impressed. You must have a good cleaner.
Oh, I gave it a good whisk.
One of the things I used to do, of course, on Crossroads, was if they needed a pianist at the motel, then I was working more with when we moved to Broad Street, you know, the Central Television, and I used to do the occasional cocktail pianist, you know, in the motel.
Aston was a lovely place to work. Yes, there was a lot of camaraderie. It's because it was small and intimate, I think, and even if I didn't know everyone and the jobs they did, they knew me because I was a one-off. There was only one stage manager. And so people would just come and talk to you. Yes, it was a lovely atmosphere. Now, when we moved to the new studios, that also was a very nice atmosphere, but it was sort of bigger and less intimate.
Say anything?
They don't, do they? They send the results to Dr. Farner when they get them and for what they're worth.
How do you feel?
So-so.
Oh, well, perhaps they'll put it right this time.
Who knows? Hey, Pops, do you need the van anymore?
Finished.
I'll sling it in the garage, then.
Noel Gordon was an absolute pleasure to be with. She was delightful, very professional. You always knew where you were with her. And the fact that there was just she and I were really the females on the whole programme, because those days you didn't get many females behind the cameras. It was just great. And then from then on, I worked with her for 2.5 years on other programmes as well, but always on Lunchbox, which were live. And one of the funny stories I can remember, I think his name was somebody Elliot, similar to mine, and he had been an Olympic diver, but he was a singer, very good looking, and he during rehearsal he'd sung this song, and they decided halfway through that they were going to use dry ice. And this is live, of course. So halfway through, you've got this musical break where he does a backflip showing off how versatile he was from the Olympics. And of course, when he went to find his mic, it was hidden. He's groping around trying to find it in the dry ice. And I can't remember the end, but I know that it never happened.
No, I'm afraid he's not here at the moment. He'll be in the morning. Can I take a message? Oh, Mr. Burns. Oh, yes, the green station wagon. Yes. Yes, it'll be ready by lunchtime tomorrow. Yes, I personally guarantee it. No problem whatever. Not at all. You're welcome. Okay, bye.
Lunchbox finished and Crossroads started. And I did the first episode. I was a production assistant on the first episode of Crossroads. And I actually finished on the 1000th episode when I was highly pregnant.
Come in. Rosemary.
May I talk to you?
If it's about the arguments we've had over this lawsuit of Chris's,
yes.
All I ask is you understand my position. I will not take part in accusing my son of fraud in court. I will not risk seeing him going to prison for the sake of a nasty juvenile prank.
I won't either. That's what I came to say. Are you angry with me for carrying it so far? To the brink?
Yes. But not really surprised. That's how far I thought you would take it, to the brink, and no further.
Then why did we quarrel so bitterly about it?
I think I was angry because it was so clear to me you wouldn't go through with it, and you were so certain that you would. It was infuriating.
The actual move to the studios in Birmingham, in Broad Street, I wasn't really there right at the beginning because I was having 2 children. But I remember when I went back and I went to stand in for, because they were short on Crossroads, and it was just doing the paperwork. And I remember one PA coming in and saying, "Oh, I don't know, I can't do this. Whoever set this up?" And I turned around and I said, "Me." But the one thing that worried me, and it's so silly, was remembering to put the light that went outside that said on air, and it flashed, because I'd never had to do that before, and that used to worry me so much.
Now that's certainly worth drinking to.
Come in.
Sorry, I thought you were alone. I'll come back. Nothing personal, Mum.
No, don't go. David, get him a drink. You'll want to celebrate.
What'll you have?
Well, I'm back on duty in half an hour. Just, sherry, please. What exactly are we celebrating?
Not we. You.
Right, me, what exactly am I celebrating?
A successful betrayal of your grandmother's trust. I shan't contest your claim in court.
I had 2 short time bursts out for maternity leave, but it wasn't like today. It wasn't a year. I think it was 3 months each time. But yes, I did at the beginning and the end. I started in 1964, October, and it was 3 weeks we had of the read-throughs and rehearsals. And my background was theatre. I'd been a stage manager in the theatre, mainly working for the wonderful Derek Solberg at the Alexandra Theatre in Birmingham and the Grand at Wolverhampton. I was very fortunate. Apparently, they wanted everyone on the original Crossroads to have some Midland connection, and they were looking for a stage manager. The stage managers in London apparently wouldn't do 5 shows a week, which we did at the beginning. And my name was put forward, and I later learned that the job was actually mine before I even arrived. So that was very nice. So I arrived 3 weeks before we started shooting and went into the office, and I said, "Well, now, what would you like me to do?" And they all looked at me like I was a moron. They said, "Well, we don't know. We've never done drama before." I said, "What do you think you should do?" So I said, "Well, the first thing I should do is read scripts and draw up a prop list." So they said, oh, okay. So they gave me scripts, and I drew up a prop list. And I said, "Well, how would you like to do the prop list? Because there are several ways of putting it down on paper and requisitioning." "We don't know," they said. So how lucky was that? For 24 years, I introduced a system which suited me very well and worked very well when we actually got into production.
So, officially it was all my fault. But he knows, and I know it was him.
What's that?
Nothing.
Oh, come on.
Oh, what should be?
It's like walking into a prayer meeting, yeah?
Imagination. Look, there's a letter.
All right.
Pete and Jessie.
Oh, great. How are they?
Fine, moving.
He's never satisfied, my brother, is he?
Ambitious.
That's it.
As new characters were brought in, they were trying to keep the Midland connection, and I think someone had recommended her. They'd seen her and thought it was worth a try, and I think she only came in for 2 or 3 episodes initially, but was a triumph.
Really?
Look, love, I haven't got any answers. I can't see into the future, all right? I'd just like to know where it all went wrong, that's all. I mean, was there any one thing that set us on a slide like this?
I don't know about the wobbly sets on Crossroads. I mean, they did occasionally do them, and I know, talking to 1 or 2 people involved in it, that the actors were under instructions not to lean against walls and things like that. So perhaps they were a bit flimsy. I don't know about necessarily wobbling it. I think it's something that Victoria Wood picked up on with Acorn Antiques, to be quite honest, and it's become rather more of a legend than it was a fact and a reality, I think.
I thought she knew.
She does. That's why her nerves are on edge.
Well, hasn't Chris seen it?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
You were going to say something?
No, I'll leave Chris to do that.
No. Well, you took it gracefully. No gloating. I must give him that.
You'd be too surprised to gloat.
You're off then?
Yes.
Said your goodbyes to Chris?
Twice.
And now to me.
Yes. I was looking for Mrs. Mortimer, but I can't find her.
I'll forward your goodbye and wish you bon voyage on her behalf.
Well, we had some very funny things that happened over the years, but I will tell you about what became known as the baked bean incident. When we moved from Aston to the new studios, we had room for more sets, and we had a post office village store set. And in the village store bit, there were household goods for sale. And of course, we weren't allowed to show any trade names. Well, the prop buyers had purchased all this stuff. I think they'd been given by a famous baked bean company, but we had to hide the labels. And one day, so I used to go and turn the labels round because the prop boys would forget, or one thing. And one day, we're going back to the afternoon session, and the floor manager came and said, the show's blacked. I said, why is the show blacked? You should know. I'm thinking, oh my God. So I flew off to find the producer, and I said, the show's blacked, why? They said I should know. And it turned out that the shop steward, who thought he should have had my job anyway when I first arrived, and had always got it in for me, and I didn't know anything about this, had seen me turning tins round to put the labels out of, and he'd blacked the programme. And our producer, who was the famous Reg Watson, who was the most wonderful man to work for, very fair, he said, they've said they will go back to work if you move everything that you touched. Well, I think I touched just about everything on the set. So I said, okay, I said, I will go and do it. So I went back into the studio. It was a dark studio. There was just me in there. And I started, and the shop steward came in, and he stood in front of me with his arms folded like that, glaring. And I have to say, after about 10 minutes, I lost my cool completely and utterly. I had a tin of baked beans in my hand, and I threw it, not at him, but it was in his direction. And I said, I'd never heard anything so stupid in my entire life. I was then whisked off to medical centre to be calmed down. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, about 2 days later, I was summoned up to the suits in the offices. I thought, oh God, this is it. My job's gone. Anyway, they all apologised to me and said I should never have been put in such a terrible situation.
Hello, welcome once again to Beat the Benny! The the ever-popular regular weekly Battle of Wits that we only started this morning and almost certainly will never ever run again. The money no object quiz game where we ask members of the public to see if they can do battle with the brain beneath the balaclava. Can they outwit the weed under the woolly? The man, no you can't, the man who coined that now classic immortal line, "Oi, got a jaffer for the gaffer," and topped even that classic earlier this week when he heard the bitter news that his lifelong love had left him for the future king with his simple but oh so poignant line, "Oi, McCroyan for Miss Doyen."
The unions were, I found, a very hard thing to work with, particularly in the beginning. I'd come from the theatre where everything was much more free and easy, and my very first experience was I went into the studio to be shown round. They just put the sets up, and I saw a small refrigerator being taken in to one of the sets, and the props were carrying the fridge. I can't remember whether it was the house electricians or the studio electricians, but one lot were carrying the lead and the other lot were carrying the plug. That is absolutely true. And in my naivety, I said, "Oh, well, why is it taking so many men to carry such a little fridge?" And there were difficulties. There were a lot of difficulties. For example, if we wanted flowers on the set, sometimes they would arrive and they'd be too high, or they'd be not high enough to hide a microphone. And sound would say to me, "Do you think you could rearrange them?" And that would cause all sorts of problems. So we used to have to take the flowers out secretly to the prop stores, and I would rearrange them and put the mic in. Then they'd be carried in. And there were things like, well, we had a dining room set. I wasn't allowed to lay the tables. And the boys, bless them, they were lovely. I will tell you, I had the most lovely set of prop men that I worked with. And I always just call them my boys, and they ranged from about 19 to 65, but they were all lovely and always worked very hard and very well with me. But they hadn't got a clue about laying a table properly. So we had all sorts of dramas about that, and then it was agreed, they had a union meeting, and it was agreed that I could lay one place, which they then could copy. Well, of course, they didn't copy it right, did they? They put forks on the right, left, you know, everything back to front, upside down.
Mr. Hawkins, who had a hit? Who had a hit with a record called Modern Girl?
I don't know.
I'll give you a clue. I'm allowed to give you one clue. It's the result of sweeping up the streets in a large Nottingham suburb.
Cleaner Beeston.
Cleaner Beeston, Sheila Easton. That's near enough. Well done, well done, well done. Right.
Crossroads was really wonderful. We had so many famous people come in and out and pass through and do short stays. We had someone like David Jason, a lovely story about David. I think with three of us went to the Swan Theatre at Worcester to see if David was amongst them, and he managed to drop my car keys down a drain. So, but fortunately, my father, who had been in the motor trade, had found this magnetic box with a spare key that went in the wheel disc, so we were able to get a key and come home. But they all thought it was quite hilarious. But there were many people. I mean, there was John Bentley, who was famous as the White Hunter. There was Anthony Steele, who was a very famous film star. And Itmar, of course, with Jimmy Handley. He came through. Oh, I could go on and on and on. And actually, I have got a list of all the cast, which I've still got, which is quite interesting. But very many famous people. And people that, at the time, you didn't realise were quite famous. It's like Liz Smith. Most people will know Liz Smith. She was in The Vicar of Dibley, the old lady that used to do all these funny recipes. So it's when you look back, or nowadays you see people on screen and you think, oh gosh, they were in, they were in. And Elaine Page was in Crossroads. I mean, Malcolm McDowell was in Crossroads. They're not all big parts and not all long term.
So on stage, we've got music from Stage Club and competitions galore.
And also our special guest this morning, top actor Paul Henry. Benny from Crossroads. What's up, Benny? What's up?
Haven't you seen the headlines?
Well,
Miss Diane said she was gonna marry me and that she couldn't go. Stop laughing! It's not funny, Lenny. You don't realise I've been saving all my pocket money up for years.
It's
Now I
Miss
can't.
Diane that's married.
Yes, just because he's got a crown, I mean, I got a woolly hat, you know, it's not fair.
Crossroads, as you well know, got knocked right, left and centre about how bad it was and this and that and the other and the sets moving, which they didn't, by the way, but that's another story. Through Reg Watson and Sir Leonard Matthews, we had a storyline of Sandy in a wheelchair, and a gentleman called Noel Crane wrote in to say he was a tetraplegic, and if he could give us any advice, he would be happy to do so. And Reg Watson invited him and his mother to the studio. Noel had been in a swimming accident and had broken his neck. His wife had left him, and his mother became the main carer. And through this story, Reg and Sir Len got money together and started off a scheme which was called the Crossroads Care Attendance Scheme. And it started off as a trial. They found a carer who went to live with the Cranes for a week, and then Mrs. Crane went off on holiday and had a break, and the carer looked after Noel. And this went on for quite a few years. It went into Europe, and then, of course, like everything else, money dried up. But I have to say that the Crossroads Care Attendance Scheme, now known under another name, still runs, but it doesn't offer the residential respite. It just offers a few hours a day. But I'm really very proud of that. And I was actually giving a talk somewhere about Crossroads, and I said, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of this scheme. And a lady in the audience put her hand up and said, they looked after my son. And I think that's something really to be very proud of.